Hello and welcome back to RedTeamRaw, a video podcast series providing you raw insight into cybersecurity experts and their adversarial mindset. These experts have not only walked the walk, but have shaped the industry in some way. They're now sharing their offensive TTTs, tips, tricks, and techniques to help motivate and inspire the next generation of cybersecurity professionals. I'm your host, Manet Saib, a fellow red teamer and social engineer. My background is the former Red Team lead for the UK Central Bank, where I used offensive techniques to protect the UK's payment and gold systems. I'm now the Director of Global Intelligence at Picnic, a company protecting against social engineering attacks. So again, who's this series for? Well, if you're considering breaking into cybersecurity, an experienced professional looking for your next step, or a general cybersecurity enthusiast, then this series will take you on an exclusive journey into the attacker mindset. Today, we are joined by a SANS Red Team instructor, the founder of RedTeamerTips, and a rockstar Red Teamer, Jean-Francois Maes.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Pleasure to be here. Hey.
Thank you for taking the time to be here as well. I mean, I've given you an intro, but I'm sure you have a lot more to add in what you're doing. So I'll let you kind of kick off.
No, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I must say, it's always awkward for me when people like label me as an expert or as a red teamer, because it still sounds very surreal to me, even though I've been doing it for quite a lot of years now. But yeah, if you benchmark yourself with the greats out there, and you have like the guys at SpectreOps who do all the crazy research and made Bloodhound and all that stuff, and you look at the DEF CON talks and the Black Hat talks, and then you're like, I don't know, man, cybersecurity experts. It's maybe a bit too soon to label me that way, but
I think you're too humble. You're a SANS instructor, right? That's air horns right there. I mean, you are like an inspiration for like people getting into this industry, and like even for professionals that are looking at the next step. So this is one of the key reasons I want to bring you on, because I want to explore your journey. What is it that you did that was different, kind of outside the box, and how did you get to where you are?
Right. Well, it started very, very weird for me because when I was a teenager, basically, I spent a lot of time playing video games, not really sporting, not really working out that much. I was really a bit overweight. And my ambitions were never to go into InfoSec at all. My ambitions were never hacking or never like even studying. My primary goal when I was a teenager was to be a professional gamer. And I was quite good at it as well. I started making some money through unofficial ways, let's say, boosting people in some video games. It was pretty good. I even contended in some tournaments online. But yeah, that all ended when basically college started to happen, because my parents were like, no, you will not be a video gamer. That's not a career. That's not viable.
Gonna sit at home and look at now where we are in COVID, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they basically forced me to study, and I'll be very honest, I'm not a good student. I never was, even though now I have quite a lot of certifications and I'm a teacher myself. I was never a good student. I basically didn't care about college at all. I went there because my parents forced me to go there, studied system engineering, but never really studied, to be honest. I went to class, but even at class, I was playing video games because there was mandatory attendance. So I went there with my laptop, but I didn't even pay attention. I was just playing video games. And then that went on for like 2 or 3 years. I actually managed to pass each and every year without studying that much. But at the end, like the final year of college, I had one professor who was starting to get really annoyed by me, because he followed my trajectory, because he taught classes the first year, the second year, and the third year. So I was in his class all the time, but I was never paying attention. And like at the third year, he said, look, man, if you're going to keep this up, you might actually get your degree, but you're never going to find a job with an attitude like that. Basically, he was starting to trash talk me in front of the class. And that kind of was like a wake-up call for me. And I was like, screw this guy. Like, what the hell? He doesn't need it. he doesn't know me. Like, what the hell is this guy saying? So I wanted to basically teach him a lesson. And this is an analogy I kind of make all the time, but a lot of InfoSec tools out there would never be made if it was not out of spite. Like if you want someone to solve a problem for you, you just tweet, "Hey, I bet you can't solve this," and like in an hour or so, someone will be like, boom, I solved it for you.
But do you know what? Some of the greatest legends out there are made because of like people like this putting them down or saying you can't do it, or teachers saying that you're shit. Well, you know, we're going to censor it out.
Yeah.
You're shit, you're crap. Yeah. And, you know, that like feeds into like your inspiration to go out and prove them wrong.
But yeah, basically I wanted to teach this professor a lesson, started playing less and less video games and actually paying attention, studying more. And yeah, I managed to finish my my degree. I got my bachelor's in system engineering. And then I had to do an internship. It's mandatory here in Belgium. If you're in college, your final year, you do an internship to get some real world experience between brackets. So I did my internship at a consultancy company called Inuits. It's in a Belgian-based company that's basically solely focused on open source tooling. So they're using everything open source. They make full stack web applications, but they're only using open source stuff, which is actually rather interesting because that's how I learned how Linux worked. That's how I learned how open source basically works. Started learning to use GitHub, started to use continuous integration, learned all that cool stuff. And that really helped me to get a job after I finished my degree, because then I immediately got recruited by a service provider called Dimension Data. It's quite a global company, so you might have heard of it before. I started automating a lot of things because I'm also, at least I was, rather lazy back then. So when I see a problem that I can automate, I'll just do it, you know?
This is how people get into it to start off with, right? It's just going off, finding tasks that you do like mundane and just going and writing a script, whether it's Bash or Perl or whatever, you know, quick and dirty.
Exactly.
But then, you know, fast forward, your SANS trainer, like going back to your teacher who said that you can't get anywhere, it's like egg on his face now. The fact that you're teaching others and you've gone into like, I would say a further position than him because you're teaching like an expert level skill set to individuals.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But I'll be honest, I got very lucky in how that all went down because, so I already mentioned, I started automating a lot of stuff. So I got a lot of free time and then I could do two things. Either I started going back to my old habits and started playing video games at work, but I decided not to do that. I started learning about other stuff, which was cybersecurity. Because at Dimension Data, we actually have one day that is like Dimension Data Day, and we all come together at HQ, and every service line kind of shows what they've been working on. And I don't know if you know this, but Dimension Data has a very, very small team that is actually doing data governance and pen testing. So they also did a demo, and their demo was about Metasploit. And back then, I was an arrogant kid, and I thought that hackers had to be low-level programmers. They had to know like operating systems inside and outside, had to write their own exploits, learn assembly, all that kind of stuff. I thought you had to have like 9,000 IQ and 45% of someone's passwords in order to hack someone. And that turned out not to be the case, right? They showed me Metasploit, they showed me Meterpreter. And when I saw that reverse shell, I was like, whoa, what the hell? Is this really that quote-unquote easy? Of course, it's not really that easy, but you know, I started learning more and more and more about that stuff until one point I said, look, I don't want to do system engineering anymore. I wanted to start doing cybersecurity as a living, basically, like professionally. And I started looking at InfoSec jobs in Belgium. But Belgium is a relatively small country. The landscape isn't really that big. But there was one company that stood out, and it's called Inviso. And basically, Inviso is probably the leader, if I say so myself, in InfoSec here in Belgium. They also have quite a few SANS instructors as well. And I applied there. I basically had no experience at all in InfoSec. I only had about a year of system engineering experience, and I was like, screw it. I'll just apply, see what happens. If they say no, they say no. If they say yes, well, that's good for me. And yeah, they basically invited me to coffee first, like a reconnaissance call, basically, like face-to-face, just talking, just seeing which which person they had in front of them. And that went really well. I showed them that I was doing Hack the Box, that I was studying quite a lot. And they took that as a positive sign. And they said, look, we do have an entry-level position available for you, but it's more the software security assessment, so more like web application testing, a bit of mobile. Is that something that you want to do? And I was a sysadmin, and I was like, I don't really know about web applications, not really my thing, but if that's the requirement to get in there, then I'm just going to do it. And I said, yeah, look, that's fine. Just give me some web apps. I'll learn on the job, basically, because I didn't really have a lot of experience with that. And yeah, I started doing web applications for about 6 months, I think. So web app. That gets rather repetitive as well. That's basically what the market, the majority of the market requires you to do. It's web application pen testing. There's not really that much requirement of internals, let alone red teaming. That's really only like the big financials that require red teams. So the majority of the work that Inviso is doing, at least offensive side, because they also have a defensive branch, is web application testing. So I started to get rather decent at web application testing. I did my OSCP as well. Finished that.
Nice.
During my job, actually.
OSCP.
That's I did OSCE as well, like the original one.
So
another air hordes.
Yeah, there you go. You can get double ones for them as well, like. But like we'll come on to like later how they're kind of gateway certs. But yeah, please continue, because I'm really intrigued about this journey, how you've got from there now to your SANS kind of position.
Yeah. When I was pen testing for Inviso, a lot of clients started to do the transition into internal penetration testing as well. So there was a need for internal penetration testing. It's still smaller than web application, but we saw requests coming in for internals. And back then, when I joined Inviso, there were only like 3 or 4 people that were doing internals, like full time. And we started getting more work than those 4 people could handle, so they needed someone else to join their team. And because I had system administration backgrounds, it was a rather natural transition for me to actually join them into an internal pen test. So I did that, basically through my expertise of system engineering. It went really smoothly, to be honest. I didn't really have a lot of issues. We compromised the domain rather fast, because that was back when Dirk-Jan showed like the priv exchange exploit, where you just had to identify an exchange, just blast one button, and boom, you're DA. Yeah. So that went really well. And basically what happened then, at Inviso, you have a training budget that you can use. So it's a rather substantial amount of money that you can use for training. And because we also have SANS instructors, Eric van Boekenhout, which is still one of the co-founders of Inviso, basically told me, look, you did well in your internal pen testing gig, so why don't you go follow the SANS course, the 560? You have training budget, and we have some SANS instructors. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and get you in as a facilitator. So that means that you have to pay less money, and you can basically work for SANS while you're taking the course, and that's going to cost you significantly less. So you'll be able to use your training budget to do the SANS course. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So I went to Berlin, because COVID wasn't a thing back then. There were still face-to-face conferences, still face-to-face trainings. So I went to Berlin, was the facilitator for the SANS 560 course. It was taught by now one of my close friends, actually, George Ochias, which is also a SANS instructor, obviously. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to teach it. And it went really well. We vibed really well. We went drinking. And yeah, it was really fun. It was like one of the best weeks of my life, to be honest. And we won the coin. I won the coin, the 560 challenge coin for SANS. Yeah. So that went really well. It was a really pleasant experience. And yeah, life went on. Let's say another 6 months passed. Nothing really happened. I just started doing more and more internals, became a core internal member. So I started doing less and less web applications, more and more internals. And then suddenly, out of the blue, a big financial comes into play, hires Inviso to do a red team. And we never did a red we never did a red team before at Inviso. That was something completely new to us. So we didn't really have strategy. We didn't really have like an approach. We didn't have anything, basically. We just said, look, yeah, you want a red team? That's fine. We'll do a red team. Like, no problem. bit. So we started working on a strategy for red teaming because we never did that before. And because I was now one of the core members of the internal pen testing team at Inviso, I also got my say into that, right? So I give them my expertise. I said, look, this is what I would do. We did some research on command and control frameworks because back then we relied solely on Metasploit. We started to branch out, look at Cobalt-Strike. We bought a Cobalt-Strike license. We did things professionally, right? Because red team, you expect it to be a little more professional than an internal. So we watched Raphael Mudge's videos on YouTube. He has like a training kind of thing you can follow for free on YouTube. It's like 8 videos of 2 hours or something. So it's pretty crazy. We went through all that. We went through all that. We started taking notes, started doing some lab work with Cobalt-Strike just to get like a feel of how that thing behaved. And yeah, we did it. We did the operation. It went rather well, to be honest. Even though we had no experience, we still managed to get a few objectives. We managed to get domain admin as well. So it was a rather success. We didn't get the payment to go through, but at that point, it didn't really matter that much. They were already impressed that we managed to compromise their domain without triggering any alerts. So that was already very nice. And yeah, then what happened was that red team was successful, right? And how things usually go, I guess that in the UK, that's the same thing. Clients, they start talking, like big financials, they work together, they have conglomerates, they start talking to each other. So what ended up happening was that red team was a success. And of course, like another competitor of theirs also wanted the red team, and someone else also wanted the red team. So it went from a very impromptu managerial decision of doing like a one-off red team to it's against all odds being a success. And then it was a snowball effect. We started getting more and more red teams. I started to become the technical red team lead at Inviso as well, because I'm the guy that really goes deep diving, that knows a bit of low-level programming now as well. So we had a business manager, that's Jonas. He's still a very close friend of mine. We're still hanging out. And I was a technical red team, and we started basically founding this red team branch at Inviso. So we started hiring more people, getting them up to speed. And yeah, I must say at Inviso, I think I did about 20, 25 red teams in total before Eric basically told me, look, you're pretty good at this stuff. Why don't you try and become an instructor for SANS? Because I'm creating a purple team course. So Eric was creating the 699 back then, which is the purple team course for SANS. And I would like some help with that. I would like you to be an instructor as well, so we can alternate teaches, and I don't have to teach all those courses by myself. We can basically alternate, and that would free up some time for me, so I can basically steer the direction of Inviso, because he was still the co-founder. He still has a lot of managerial tasks at Inviso as well. So that ended up happening. So he got me into the instructor development program. I started first as a technical assistant for the course, so for the 699 course. That went well. Then I did a module teach, which basically means I'm going to teach like one section I know really well. That went well as well. Then I did a half of a day. So that means like every single day for the course, I did half a day of teaching. And then I did the other half day. So I did a full teach until my first solo teach. And yeah, now I'm basically an instructor, and I'm also writing my own red team course. So there you go.
Epic. So not only have you become an instructor, you have now been given the opportunity to write your own course. For the audience who don't know the difference between a pen test, a red team, and a purple team, can you just break it down?
Yeah, sure. So a internal pen test is basically you go to the client, you get a scope of in-scope systems, and you fire literally everything you got at them, right? You run a vulnerability scan, you use Metasploit, anything goes, basically. It's gloves off. You don't care about getting detected or not. That's not the purpose of an internal pen test. The purpose of an internal pen test is to try and identify as many vulnerabilities as you can, so they get basically a roadmap that they can follow. You rate the findings you find based on severity, of course, and then you basically present your report, so they now have a understanding of their vulnerabilities in their internal network, And based on the severity that you provide them, they can start working on fixing that. Sometimes that will be a very easy fix, like just pushing a GPO to a computer and it's fixed. Sometimes it could take a little bit more time, because imagine that you don't have any endpoint defense. Then they will start needing to do some marketing research, trying to figure out which kind of vendor they want in their environment. So sometimes, especially when managerial decisions start rolling in, that could take several months, if not several years. So that's what you kind of have to do, right? So it's a bit of a learning curve. It's a bit of a growth pattern. Most companies start with an internal pen test. So they know which vulnerabilities there are internally. They try to fix that up. Once that's fixed up, they can try and do a red team engagement. So that means as a company grows, as a company matures, and they start becoming more and more certain of themselves, that they don't have gaping holes anymore in their security, they can try and hire you for a red team exercise. And what a red team exercise is, it's not just the technology that you're testing, it's also the people and the processes. So that means that you have a select few people in a company that knows that a red team is going to happen. Usually that's some C-level audience, but maybe also like someone else, someone technical is in there as well. As long as the SOC, like the security center of that organization, isn't aware that a red team is happening, then you can do a full red team. And you basically ask them the question, look, what is like the worst thing that can happen to your company? Like what keeps you awake at night? What's your core business, and what absolutely cannot go wrong for your company? So then they start giving you some information. A classic example at a bank is, oh, we don't want the hacker to start transferring funds to an offshore account. That makes sense, right? That's something you don't want to happen. That would be very, very bad. But it could also be something more benign, right? It could also be like PII. We don't want our clients to access PII of other clients. That could also be a thing. So once you have some objectives, basically, then the red team can start. And that means you are trying to get an initial foothold into the environment. And that could be through anything, as long as it's within the rules of engagement. Sometimes that means, look, you're going to go through phishing. It could also be smishing. It could be phishing. It could be a USB dead drop. It could be a physical. Anything goes, as long as they agree with you beforehand, of course, that you are allowed to do said thing, you can do it. And your goal as a red team is to try and achieve your objectives, if possible. If not possible, try to get an as privileged foothold as you can in the environment without getting detected. And even if you get detected, that doesn't necessarily mean that your red team is a failure, because as I already mentioned, it's not just the technology that you're testing, it's also the people and the processes. So it could very well be that your phishing payload triggered an alert from, for example, an EDR like CrowdStrike. They get a pop-up saying, oh, a malicious payload executed. But if their SOC has to handle 100,000 alerts every single day, it could very well be that they're not going to see it, or they are going to see it but not investigate properly, or in the worst case, they are going to see it, they are going to investigate it, but they're going to say, it looks normal, it's a false positive. Let's just classify it and move on with the day. Yeah, we once had a red team, and unfortunately, fortunately for us, unfortunately for the client, one of their junior analysts were on duty when we started operating, and we did get a Cobalt-Strike beacon at the client. It triggered an alert, but the junior SOC analyst saw that it was like software. It was like legitimate software, right? So he just classified it as benign. Well, of course, it's not benign. It's a freaking command and control. But yeah, sometimes mistakes happen. We're still humans after all. And from a red team perspective as well, right? We do mistakes as well. We sometimes launch a payload or we press a button while we didn't really want it to do. So mistakes happen across the board, blue side, red side, it doesn't matter. In the end of the day, we're still human. What I do want to stress though, is a red team is not designed to ridicule the company. It's not designed to ridicule the SOC of the company. It's definitely not a red versus blue kind of thing. even though you work separately and you try to stay undetected, your goal as a red teamer is not to say, haha, we pwned you. No, your goal as a red teamer is to help mature the company, help better define their processes, help fine-tune their detections. So that's red teaming. And then the next step that you can take is purple teaming. And purple teaming is going to be a combination, a joint effort between a red team and the company's blue team. You're going to sit together into a room. You're going to say, look, what's your threat level? Like, what are you afraid of? Which actors would typically target your environment? And you're going to start conducting some threat intelligence together, or maybe separately, or even through a third entity. It could be provided for you as well. You're going to consume that threat intelligence, preferably together with the blue team. You're going to start making a plan. You're going to say, look, we're going to test this, this, and this, and this. And we're going to do it this, and this way. What is your expected outcome, dear blue teamers? Then the blue teamers are going to look at your plan, look at your strategic procedures in there. They're going to say, oh, we expect that we would get an alert on this step. We get an alert on this step. We're not too sure if we will alert on this step. So that's maybe a nice thing to check. And yeah, we're probably not going to detect this step. So then you actually execute it. And then you verify whether or not the hypothesis of the blue team was correct. So if they did get those alerts, or if they didn't get those alerts, then you have to start fine-tuning a bit. It's a bit of detection engineering, basically. So you get red teamers, you get blue teamers, and you try to make the use cases of a organization better so they detect more.
And it's collaborative, right? And
yes.
No, thank you, air horns, for that, because like you've clearly defined the definitions between all the terms, and we're going to snip this. And for those who don't know what it is, we're going to put it out there, right? But I think like what you said about the purple team. So it's a collaborative approach between like the blue team and the red team. Not only are you making the blue team better, you're also making the red team better as well, because you're seeing what they're detecting. You're thinking of ways to bypass what the detections are. I thought it was really good. And I think organizations are moving to this way. And if they're not, they should be, right? This purple teaming approach, because it's all good doing the red team, and you need to do that for compliance, right? In the UK, you need to do it for compliance, and in Europe as well. But I think internally, you need to have this continuous testing where you start doing purple teaming maybe once every quarter or something like that, to make sure that your detections are working, they're in place, and you're educating both sides. I really want to go into like a story. You mentioned like on the red teams, initial access, your foothold. So what is your most common way of doing it? What have you seen from requirements through clients? And maybe give us like a juicy story of a campaign or something that you've done.
Yeah, so I don't know. Probably it's the same for almost every red team, I think, because red teamers talk amongst each other as well. And I still think that the number one way of achieving access into an environment is through the good old-fashioned malicious Word document or Excel, basically just an evil macro. Of course, defenses got a lot better over the years, so you do have to take into account a lot more security posture. But unfortunately for clients, and fortunately for us, it's still a relatively, I wouldn't say easy, but a relatively safe bet that someone is going to click enable macros on a document and get compromised that way. That's still our number one initial entry is still just macro documents. Yeah, spear phishing, social engineering. We have used XL4 a few times, but not that often, to be honest. Even though I see the appeal of doing it, because you don't have your VBA in like the expected location. You could just have it in a cell. But my tradecraft at Invisor was so fine-tuned, so focused on those malicious documents that we didn't really have a need on XL4 macros. Even though it's a nice vector, I only used it once or twice against Defender ATP, because Defender ATP is a nuisance. I'll be very honest. I'm not sponsored by Microsoft or anything, but if I compare EDR vendors amongst each other, I think historically speaking, the EDR that caught me the most or that provided me with the most problems is Defender for Endpoint. because the telemetry, just like the sheer telemetry that Microsoft has, it's insane. Yeah, it just works. So that's probably number one. Number two is actually HTAs. HTAs are also like a classic example, but that's also just spear phishing. However, funnily enough, if there's multi-factor authentication, which is what it blows my mind, to be honest, but if there's multi-factor authentication enabled anywhere, the most successful method I had to bypass multi-factor authentication is just to trigger the multi-factor authentication. I mean, you won't believe how many people will just like accept the pop-up. Like, oh, I need to authenticate. So okay, you know, it's insane, but it works, man. It's crazy. And then we did some social engineering as well, with physical wise. That's always fun, but in my opinion, not always as realistic, because let's face it, the chances that a Russian threat group is going to take the plane to Belgium, physically walk into a building, bypass the security, plug in some kind of rogue device and get out. I mean, yeah, it's not really that realistic, but it's always fun if we get a physical. I mean, I'm not going to complain. It's fun to do, but yeah. Yeah, so a war story. I told the one on Clubhouse as well, and it's basically
let's share that. That was amazing. Let's do that one.
Right. So we were hired to do a physical for a large financial company here in Belgium, and that large financial company was, I'll be very honest, relatively secure. So they did require access badges. We tried to clone a badge. It didn't work. We tried to just create a fake badge because we did find someone flexing their badge. You often find that, right, when you do some OSINT. Some new guy that joined the company, oh, look at my fancy badge. And I mean, it's so dumb.
For those who don't know what OSINT is and what you're talking about.
Yeah, so OSINT is basically you trying to find as much information as you can for a specific company or a specific target through all kinds of search engines, basically publicly available data online. If it's online, you can find it. You just have to search hard enough. Sometimes that's just simply using Google, using Instagram, using Facebook. Could be a little bit more difficult, where we have to use something like Spiderfoot, for example, that starts crawling the internet on its own. Maybe even try the dark web, even though I don't really have a lot of success with the dark web. But we include it as well just to see if any threat group maybe has information on our target. We always hope that's not the case, but you never know. So yeah, usually, I'm not going to say always, but usually, especially on LinkedIn, you'll find someone with a picture of the company, like with the badge, and you can see the badge and you can try to recreate it, whichever way you see fit, of course. So we tried recreating it. It didn't work. We tried cloning it. How can we clone it? Well, you have a device called a Proxmark, which basically is able to clone RFID signals. And if you walk close enough to someone with a badge and you have the Proxmark with you, you can try, as long as you're within range and close enough, to try and clone the badge. Unfortunately, if there's strong encryption signals in there, that's not always possible. Or if they're using some kind of RFID blocking shield thingy, then it's also not possible. So we tried it, didn't work. We tried just going in as a visitor, tried to get past the receptionist, didn't work. We tried posing as a worker, basically, so fluorescent jacket, top hat, maybe even a ladder. You can go as crazy as you want. Try to get in. Doesn't work because maintenance workers need to have a sign-in sheet, need to have a work order. So nothing we tried worked. And then there's two things you can do. Either you give up, you say, look, we tried the physical, didn't work, we didn't manage to get a foothold. But you know, if you do a physical, you always try to get in, right? Even when things are hard, you still keep trying to come up with crazy ideas. And it turns out that physical was actually right around the season of Valentine's Day. So we tried a few times getting in on separate days, didn't work. And then Valentine's Day came around, and one of my teammates basically came with the idea, look, we tried everything we know in our playbook. Nothing has worked so far. Why don't we just try and get in with flowers. Why don't we pose as a flower delivery guy? Why don't we just try to get in that way? And we were like, that's probably never going to work, but, we can try, it doesn't hurt to try. So we went to a flower store. We picked out a bouquet. I posed as the flower delivery guy. So I had like a clipboard basically with deliveries, fake names, of course, fake addresses. I went with my car to the large financial, got out with the bouquet in my hand, my clipboard in the other hand, started walking up to the receptionist, said, look, I have a delivery for this person. Is she in today? And obviously we knew she was going to be in today because we scoped out the place. We knew that the target went to work almost every single day. So she was in, we knew she was in. And we're like, she's in. What's this for? I'm like, I have to deliver these flowers. She's like, no, you can leave them here at the receptionist's. She's going to pick them up later. And I'm like, no. I have to have physical proof. My boss requires me to have physical proof that I delivered the flowers to the person themselves. I need to take a picture for my boss. I have to go see her, or can you get her down? She's like, no, I can't get her down. But you know what? You can go up. She's on the second floor. I'm going to give you. So she went with me to the elevator because the elevator is also badge controlled. So she put her badge there. She pressed the second floor, and she basically let me alone at that point. So that was nice. I mean, I was now alone in an elevator, second floor. So elevator opened, second floor. Obviously, probably it's the same in the UK. But what happened was, I immediately, when the elevator door opened, I went around and I started looking for the escalator doors, because not always, but the majority of the time, the elevator is badge controlled, but the escalator door, like the stairs, are not badge controlled. So I immediately went to like the staircase, went all the way to the top floor, because we knew from our intelligence that the top floor was the managerial floor. So went to the managerial floor, got out. I still had my flowers with me in case someone stopped me. I could still get out of there. I was like, I'm just trying to deliver these flowers. So I went out on the executive floor, looked around very carefully just to see big offices, of course. Executive tend to have big offices. And I found an empty one. Just around the corner. So it was rather secluded, not a lot of passage going on. I tried to lockpick it. And it worked. It wasn't really that big of a lock, so it worked. I got the lockpick in, managed to get into the office of that executive. There was a file cabinet there. The file cabinet was locked, but again, file cabinets don't really have that big of a lock, so you tried to lockpick that. Got the file cabinet open as well, and managed to get some confidential information of clients. So there you go. Now I had a picture of me with flowers and the confidential file. It was pretty fun.
So, like, going into that, social engineering, convincing the human, like you were convincing them back and forth, got in. Then you had the opportunity to go for a lockpick. Like, that is amazing. So, how did the client respond to that?
They were just impressed by our creative thinking, right? Because we did pat them on the back. We did say, look, we tried a lot of things, nothing worked. Unfortunately for you, it happened to be Valentine's Day, and it just takes one human that doesn't pay a lot of attention, and it's basically over, right?
Yeah, and that's the same with like spear phishing, right? Because it's all playing on the social engineering, the human element, which is how organizations get popped.
Yeah.
So we spoke about a story. I touched on your blog, right? So you're the author of RedTeamer Tips, and on there you've got quite a few posts. You're talking about individuals, how they want to get into pen testing or red teaming, and then you've got posts around development of tools. So one of the tools that you've developed is ClippB.
ClippyB,
ClippyB, right? So I thought that was amazing. So I don't know, I'll let you explain it for those who don't know what that is.
Yeah, so ClippyB is just a assembly, a C# assembly that you can run through Cobalt-Strike. So Cobalt-Strike is a command and control framework which is capable of spawning C# assemblies in memory. So through a other process, you're going to inject that assembly into the process, and it's basically going to run. And ClippyB is a C# program that is just listening on the background waiting for something to hit the clipboard. So if you Control C or Control V something, password managers, wink, wink, when you copy passwords, it's going to sit in your clipboard for a few times. So it's going to just passively listen, wait until something hits the clipboard. If something new hits the clipboard, it's going to spit that back out to your Cobalt-Strike window. So you know every time someone copies something new in their clipboard, you're going to see that data flow in real time. So that's
so you've basically man in the middle password managers to compromise credentials.
Yes,
Awesome.
Correct.
You're developing these tools. You've told us your journey about how you've gone to engagements and client side, and then also become a SANS instructor. How do you manage to do it all?
By having no life. I'll be very honest. I have a lot of people ask me that question, and to be honest, yes, I'm not gonna lie. I make a decent living. I'm a SANS instructor. I'm now a consultant at TrustedSec. I can't complain money-wise, but I'll be very honest. Sacrifices have been made. I don't go out. I rarely see friends. Basically, I live together with my girlfriend. Thank God I found a girlfriend. I have a girlfriend, so I live together with my girlfriend. But other than my girlfriend, that's about it. That's literally it. Yeah. So it's pretty crazy. So there's one thing I prioritize above everything, and that is getting my gym sessions in. So every morning, I try to wake up at 6 a.m. 6 a.m. in the morning. I get up, make my breakfast, go to the gym, because for me, the gym is like a bit of therapy, to be honest. It allows me to clear my head, get energized, to start the day with a clear head. So I work out from 7 to 9. Then I start working, do my day. And I do my 8 hours for TrustedSec, sometimes more, of course, especially in red team operations, because I feel like that's something we haven't really touched upon. But in red team operations, there's a lot of times where you'll just be sitting and waiting, to be very honest.
Waiting for beacons to come back, right? Is it? Yeah. Is it? Or no, hold on. Have you had a beacon come back while you're in the gym? Or when you're out and you're like, ping, beacon, run back.
Yeah, that happens. I also always have my laptop with me in my gym bag. We have lockers in the gym, but you never know when something is going to pop up. And that's especially true now when I'm working at TrustedSec, which is a US firm. I'm still living in Belgium. I'm allowed to work my 9 to 5 Belgian time.
Yeah.
But in a red team operation, especially when you're reliant upon a user executing your payloads, that could be middle of the night for me, and I'll be expected to start working. So especially in red team operations, there's a lot of times where you just sit and wait. Of course, you can sift through your data that you already collected and try to figure out your attack path, your strategy, whenever that second callback comes in. Because usually for stealth, you don't want to have a continuous connection. You beacon it out. So it could be that you're sitting 1 hour waiting, basically with your command queued up, but you have to wait 1 hour for it to execute. So there's a lot of waiting involved. And while that's happening, I do my 8 hours for TrustedSec, but then I'm also a SANS instructor. So now, especially when I'm creating my own course, it's gruesome. I'll be very honest. I'm working like 16, 17, 18 hours a day. And that's about it.
Are you still getting your gym in though? That is the main
thing. Yeah. Still getting my gym in.
Just hopping on to your blog post about wanting to be a pen tester and red teamer. So one of the things that you said in the post was understand why you want to do this. If you're coming into this industry, why are you trying to do it? And one of the things you said was, if it's to hack your ex's Instagram or social media, then just stop, right? So
yeah, exactly. It's probably the number one question you get. Well, there are actually two questions you get when you start telling people that you're a hacker. The first one is always going to be, "Oh, if you're a hacker, why don't you just hack a bank?" Yeah, I'm like, yeah. If it was that easy, I wouldn't really want to like have my money in the bank. I mean, I would probably keep my money at home under my mattress or something. So yeah, that's probably the number one question you get asked. The second question is actually for people that want to become a hacker as well. And they're like, oh, how do I become a hacker? And to be honest, that's a really tough question to answer because the road is different for everyone. There hasn't been a single instance, and I've talked to a lot of people because I am a SANS instructor, so I tend to have conversations with people all over the world, and I still have yet to find an exactly similar road to pen testing. Everyone comes from different backgrounds. Everyone has different resources at their disposal. I actually recall a story of a bug bounty hunter that started hunting bounties on his freaking mobile phone. Like he did bounty programs on his mobile phone because he couldn't afford a laptop. So at first he was bug bounty hunting on his phone. He managed to get a few bugs. I don't know how he did it, to be honest, because that's like playing life in extreme mode. But he managed to get a few bugs, and he did get enough funds together to then finally get a laptop and get a better setup. But I just want to illustrate, some people come from countries which unfortunately are not as developed as Europe or as the US. So internet speed could be a problem. Internet connection even could be a problem. Technology itself could be a problem. So yeah, the backgrounds completely vary. The thing is, you can become a hacker, and you probably will become a hacker if you're motivated enough, if you want it enough. You'll always find ways to figure out how to teach yourself how to hack, and that's a conversation I had with Mark from Outflank. I don't know if you are familiar with Outflank. Mark, he's Dutch as well, so he's pretty close by. We're good friends as well. And we talked about that as well. And he was like, yeah, when I started, because Mark is a few years older than me, when I started, I didn't have YouTube. I didn't have Hack the Box. I didn't have TryHackMe. The only thing I have was like a manual of like 5,000 pages. Yeah, like a manual of Intel CPU of like 5,000 pages, where you had to have like a PhD in engineering to try and figure out what the hell it meant. But that was how I learned hacking. So especially as technology advances, I think there are more and more resources available to you for completely free, to be honest, that can teach you how to hack. I know I'm a SANS instructor, but I still like to promote other security practitioners as well, like the Cyber Mentor, for example, provides excellent content on YouTube for free. Also has a certification that doesn't cost you a shit ton of money. You have Rostamaus with £0 security. If you want to start becoming a red teamer, he has a course as well. So there's so much content. Like you have Stock. So many good YouTubers. John Hammond, for example. So many prolific people who are explaining things in a very profound and understandable way, even if you don't have experience. By just watching these people do what they do, you will tend to pick up a few things, and you will start getting the ball rolling and getting into the field of pen testing.
Like what you said, I think you need, like, for those getting into the industry, you need to dedicate the time to go and do it, because no point saying I want to do it and then like, oh, where do I start, because there's so much out there. It's like you need to take it step by step, right? It's a journey, and in this industry, compared to like many others, I would say accounting, like you get your degree, you're done, you never study again. In this industry, technology is always changing. You need to keep up to date, right? And it becomes part of being in the industry to continuously learn. I mean, you know, I looked at your portfolio, mate. You got so many certs as well, and you're just getting them out every year. I've seen you done all the pro labs in Hack the Box.
Yeah, correct. When you tend to do a lot of operating, you tend to do a lot of internal pen tests, you kind of miss that stuff, right? So if I'm on a holiday or something, and I have nothing to do, I finally have a rare moment of downtime, I just pick up some stuff and I start tinkering with it. You know, I mean, yeah. It's not just going back to basics, but usually there are some brain teasers in there as well. So it keeps the mind sharp, and that's what you need, right? You need to continuously challenge yourself to overcome obstacles, to learn new skills, because in the end, you're only as good as what's in here, right? So yeah.
And the other thing, touching on those who are joining the industry, another blog you have, which is so relevant, networking. So who you network with, how you're building your social network. So why don't you go into that? Because it seems like what you're saying there, for people who want to come into the industry, there's so much free resources out there that you can go and learn. YouTube, number of people, number of certs, and then networking. So why don't you just elaborate on like your kind of view on the networking and how people should grow their social channels?
Yeah, so one thing I get asked a lot, especially when I was still working at Adviso, because I was also involved in the hiring process, is how do I land a job as a pen tester? How do I land a job as a red teamer? And yes, I'll be honest, there is a shortage of people in the industry, still are, but because of those free resources out there, a lot of people are catching up. A lot of people want to, because hacking is kind of sexy, right? Oh, people want to do that for a living. They kind of want to get in there, or they want to be like Elliot from Mr. Robot, and so we do get a lot of applicants. And then the thing is, how do you stand out, right? Because even if you do try hack me, even if you do hack the box, sorry, but almost everyone does hack the box. Almost everyone does try hack me. So that's not going to give you any advantage when you apply for a job, because guess what? Everyone else is also doing exactly the same thing as you. So how do you stand out? Well, how do you stand out? You can do that, in my opinion, in two very big ways. One is networking, because unfortunately, I don't like this part of life, but unfortunately, that's part of life. You'll tend to get jobs based on the people that you know. Sometimes there are going to be vacancies at companies, but those vacancies won't ever be even publicized, because they're going to get picked up by some acquaintance of someone. And unfortunately, that's the case with some jobs, especially when we are starting to come in the higher ranking of jobs, right? Like managerial jobs, C-level jobs. And the chances of you, sorry to burst your bubble, and don't shoot me, but if you are a pen tester at a specific, if you're a pen tester or a red teamer at a specific companies, and your hopes are to one day become a manager or to even become like a CISO or a C-level thing, according to studies, this is not always true, by the way, but according to studies, those kind of jobs are most likely getting hired from the outside instead of from the inside. That's just a fact. It's not always like that. I'm not saying that you can't grow into a C-level position, but unfortunately, those jobs are usually getting sourced from the outside perspective. And usually it's going to be a friend of a friend or a friend of the CEO. So networking is important. That's one way you can stand out. If you know the right people, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, but if you know the right people, it's going to get easier for you to land a job. That's just how it is. The second part of being able to stand out is through putting in the work. What do I mean by that? I'm not talking about hack the box. I'm not talking about even certifications. I'm talking about community work. Do you have a blog? Do you have a YouTube channel? Do you have any tools? Because guess what? If you are applying for a red team job, if you apply for a red team job, I get your CV in front of me. I look at your CV. You have some experience. That's okay. You have hacked the box. That's okay. You have some certs. That's okay. But you haven't written a single tool on your GitHub, or you haven't blogged about anything. You haven't went to a conference. You don't have any docs. Then unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, but certificates can be bought. There's a whole market, there's a whole black market out there where you just pay someone like 1K and they're just going to do the cert for you. And you might say, oh, but OffSec has a proctoring kind of thing. Doesn't freaking matter. They still find ways to do it for you. No problem. If you want to pass OSCP, just go into one of the dark websites, pay someone like 5K, you're going to get OSCP. So unfortunately, certs can be bought. So if you have a cert, that's great. You have a cert, awesome. But we cannot validate whether or not you actually have the competences that cert claims that you have. So The only source of truth, in my opinion, is how you perform at a technical interview and how you perform on your GitHub, blog posts, anything like that. Because even if you have a GitHub and you have like 500 repositories, but 499 of them are just forks from another project who are still in line with the master branch, sorry, but that's just artificially creating a GitHub, and you're not going to fool anyone with that. So even if it's a stupid tool, it could be a very stupid tool. It could be that someone already created a tool that does it better than what your tool does. Doesn't matter. Do the work, publish your work, so we can see that you actually know what you're talking about. You talked about my project Clippy-B. Well, it turns out some folks at SpectreOps created a much better version of Clippy-B like 2 years before I even released Clippy-B. I didn't see it back then. I didn't do my due diligence. I was just interested. I had a problem. I want to steal someone's clipboard data. I'm just going to fix it by coding. I wanted to learn how that worked. And even though someone was ahead of me, someone already created a solution that is actually better coded than me, because I don't have a formal coding education, and the guys at SpectreOps usually have some software engineering degree, so their code is actually well developed. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if your script is dirty. It doesn't matter as long as it works. If it works, even if it's like 999 lines, and I can replace it by 2 lines of code, doesn't freaking matter. You tried it, you succeeded. Yeah, exactly.
What is the biggest challenge that you've got at the moment, and where do you think the industry is heading?
The biggest challenge I have personally at the moment is trying to find the right balance between life and work. Because, as I said, it does tend to consume me personally. That's probably not going to be the case for everyone that is listening. At least I hope that's not the case for everyone that is listening. So for me, it's just hard to find the right balance. And industry-wise, where do I think the industry is going? In my opinion, it's going to become way more advanced. I'm not going to say that you need coding experience for every single role out there, because that would be a lie. InfoSec is a really big spectrum. So for things like managerial stuff, you don't really need coding experience. But I still think that at least being able to read codes is very important. Being able to understand low-level code is becoming more and more and more important as well, especially because we are not in the 1990s anymore, where we can just drop a binary to disk, double-click it, it's going to work. Defenses are getting better. Fortunately for everyone, we are creating a safer place. So the things we do are actually creating a positive impact into the world, which is awesome. But that also means it's increasing the bar for offensive operational security. So things start to get really complex really fast. I think lower level code, C, assembly, is definitely a surplus. Knowledge of more than one operating system, also a very, very big plus if you have Linux experience, Windows experience, but also Mac OS. Believe it or not, there are some shops that are macOS only. So if you have a RedTeam gig and you land a payload on a Mac system and you don't know anything about Mac, then unfortunately you're gonna get screwed. So I think keep studying. That's the thing. Our industry, especially with like younger kids, I had this conversation the other day as well, and I think this is a good way to finish maybe the podcast. But I'm scared for like 7-year-olds that are playing Minecraft, and they freaking rebuilt they rebuilt like a processor in freaking Minecraft, man. Like you have so many STEM projects out there that are basically stimulating younger kids already getting acquainted with technology. You have freaking 6- and 7-year-olds like starting to learn how to program. At that age, your mind is still way more malleable and still way more capable of retaining knowledge than it is when you become older. So the earlier people start working with computers, I'm legitimately afraid of the malware of like the 2030s, 2040s, man. I mean, like some 16-year-old is going to create some polymorphic worm that is going to ransomware the whole freaking internet, man. It's going to be crazy.
That's going to be insane. Mate, you know, you're awesome. I really appreciate the time that you've taken to do this. I might even end it on what you've said, like I just air horns and then cut it. But you know,
yeah, that's fine.
I honestly want to thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the episode. Yeah, and like, what are you doing? How do people get in touch with you? How do people get involved in your new SANS course that you're developing? When is that going to be released?
So the best way to get in touch with me is probably through Twitter. So I'm pretty sure that in the podcast description or YouTube description, you'll be able to find my Twitter handle there. So that's probably the best way to reach me, because I am a known shit poster. I do tend to sprinkle some InfoSec nuggets every now and then on Twitter, but usually it's just some memes and some jokes with some friends. So that's probably the best way to reach me. For SANS, it's going to get released really, really soon. I actually got the dates back from SANS about 2 or 3 days ago. So we're going to hit alpha with the course, which is a private session in April. So in April, the first alpha is going to launch, and in May, beta 1 and beta 2 are going to launch. So that means that by summer 2022, you'll be able to take the course and get educated by me or my co-author, Barrett Darnell. So yeah, there you go.
Well, thank you, Jean. Once again, your advice is so valuable. So thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this. And yeah, this is the end. We'll leave it there.
All right, awesome.